Grimsley. I currently serve as a state senator, and in my professional life, I've worked in management, and I've worked to control workers' comp cost and promote employee safety, and I've also worked as a nurse grappling with emergency room patients that allowed their minor problems to escalate into catastrophic events. Today, I lead a small rural hospital where wellness in the workplace is critical to delivering quality care to those who are, by virtue of their own situations, dependent upon us. As a state legislator, I have worked for several years on public policy questions in the state Medicaid program, seeking ways to encourage better personal, preventative health decision-making to avoid public expenses and costlier care. And all of these types of issues bring us together for this hour. We are pleased to be here today discussing a natural subject in which health and productivity are necessarily linked. More than that, the business sense of investing in a healthy workforce also helps the bottom line and buffers against the ever uncertain cost associated with healthcare mandates. Today's panelists will offer us a wide range of options and perspectives to consider in the area of workplace wellness. If you own a business, manage human resource issues, or give supervision to the cost drivers in your given marketplace, I'm sure that you'll benefit from today's discussion. As we start today, we are using the title, Wellness in the Workplace. That gives us the full liberty to address a number of variables. And a great starting place is the general concept of population health. Population health, whether the population is a nation, a state, a neighborhood, or an office staff, it is focused on a given group's health outcomes by addressing health drivers. Instead of the age-old tendency to wait around for symptoms, often to the detriment of the population, we take a proactive, holistic approach to engaging before it is too late. A company's wide range of safety and wellness in a campaign that focuses on social, cultural, environmental, and physical aspects that are realities for the group can offer both short-term and long-term outcomes. And that can look different to any given group. So a cookie-cutter approach or borrowing from the playbook of the firm down the street isn't necessarily always work for the population at hand. So that's why our panelists are here today. They know these principles as well as anyone because they are practitioners in that sense. So first on our panel today is Lisa Kafka. She is an accounting executive specializing in health risk management for IMA Inc. She works with over 50 clients to understand and manage wellness strategies. Her clients range from firms with 50 employees to over 3,000 across the country and across a wide variety of industries. Of special note, Lisa doesn't just preach wellness. She models it as the Colorado Bowling Hall of Famer, and she's also a diving coach. And I'm not sure she's a Seminole fan, but she did receive her master's degree in educational and sports psychology from FSU. She currently resides in Denver, and we're glad to have her with us today. And Lisa, I'll let you start this panel off.
Great, thank you. Can you guys all hear me okay? Yeah, awesome. So I'm going to start talking off a little bit from our perspective. So I believe we should have, I don't know if we have slides popping up or not, but I'll keep talking if not. So a little bit about the company I work for. I work for IMA Insurance. We're an insurance brokerage firm. We're the 10th largest privately held insurance firm in the nation. We have offices, as stated, in Denver, which is the one I'm in, Wichita, Kansas City, and Dallas. I work within our health risk management team, which is housed within our benefits division. So any client that is a benefits client will get us available to them to work with them. And what we do is we come in and we work with the employers to develop their strategies. Ah, there they are. Fun. Okay. So we come in, we work with them. All of our backgrounds are in public health, psychology, exercise science, and we'll work closely with the benefits team to develop a strategy that's integrated and make sure it's exactly, as Senator Grimsley was saying, right for their population. Because what one employer is doing does not mean it's going to be right for the next employer to be doing, and their goals are all going to be different on that front. So just a couple things. We were asked to talk a little bit about what we've seen to create success with wellness programs and employers. And so what I want to highlight is a couple things I've seen as I've worked with many employers over the years. It consists of, what do your employees value is one of the biggest things. Don't assume you know what's going to help them own and improve their health. It takes a whole team. A lot of the times it's just dumped on HR, but really when it's successful, it's an integrated effort. And I'll go through talking about who you might want to consider to bring into the conversation that you're not already utilizing. And then lastly, be patient and constantly evaluate. I think sometimes we'll see as we go through, a lot of times people are always talking about, I want ROI and I want it within 6 months. Well, it takes a little more time, and there's some other things to look at when we go through it. So that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit today, real quickly. So, as I stated, understanding what your employees value is really key. Know the demographics of your population. Don't assume that a traditional wellness center is going to work for them. They might be a younger population, and what's going to work great for them is looking at policies, looking at doing parental leave, looking at doing flexible schedules. Or perhaps you have an aging population. What might be more valuable is looking at resources that can help your employee population handle their aging parents. That might be causing a lot of undue stress and distracting them at work because they're dealing with their parents' situation. So really understand, okay, who is our population? What are the barriers? What might they be facing? And then what's going to be the right resources to help them get healthier? As we stated, and I love hearing this, is that look at it as the holistic approach. Don't just think of it only, too often we just think physical health. We think, are we losing weight? Do we need to stop smoking? Do we need to start eating better? Yes, probably we all do. But it's not just that component, because if you're dealing with the loss of a family member, that might be your barrier from why you're exercising, and that might be your barrier why you're not eating well. And so making sure people are whole and well all around is going to be successful. I always love asking ourselves or asking employees, what would you talk about at a barbecue? If you're going to talk about your company, what are you talking about it to your neighbors at a barbecue? What do they value? And that can help give you insight on maybe where you want to focus your energy and efforts. At IMA, probably the biggest things people love, jeans policy. That makes them happier. They don't have to wear it. When we have clients, we meet with them, but when we're not, it's just a stress reduction and people are happier about it. So just think about those things that might help people be healthier and whole, and it may not even cost you anything to implement a jeans policy. The next one I want to talk about is it takes a whole team. As I stated, so many times it's just dumped on HR, a lot of times just the benefits person, and it's an afterthought. And I really want you to think about, these are all departments that we work with when we're working with our groups internally, and there's a big one I can't believe I left off, but the CFO. They're the ones who write the bill. You definitely want to make sure they're involved. But these are all areas that you want them involved, and I'm not talking about a wellness committee, but talking, engaging, seeing what they're doing, because a lot of times you can synergize on efforts. Safety might be doing a back health campaign. You should tap into that and make sure you're cross-communicating and launching extra at the same time. Public affairs is key because they can tell you when big communications or initiatives or launches are happening in other departments you might not know, so they can help make sure that you're launching and your voice doesn't get lost. One of the other biggest successes we've seen when we see groups that are working is that they take all of their external vendors and make sure they're sitting together. And this is something you should be tapping into your broker. This is what we do. Have them talking, making sure they're communicating effectively, because if not, it can cause confusion in employees. All too often I've seen programs where they have wellness coaching, they have disease management coaching, they might have case management coaching or high-cost claimant coaching. So employees can be getting reached by 3 or 4 different coaches, and they don't understand which coach is who and why, and do I get points for this one for my incentive, and is this important for, it causes a lot of confusion. So this is something that you really should be looking to your broker to have them start talking and getting them communicating and getting files so that we're getting the right population identified and outreached by the right group and not irritating and frustrating employees at the same time. I think the biggest thing when I said it earlier, be realistic. You know, we didn't get into the health situation we're in right now, so it's going to take some time to get there. Really understand also what is your employee population and what is your funding style. Are we self-funded? Are we fully insured? What size group are we? Because that's all going to make a big difference on what impact you're going to see and where. Because if you're an 80 life fully insured group, you're probably not going to start seeing anything on your healthcare cost. But if you're a larger group, a couple thousand, you might be starting to see it. This is something, again, I always encourage you, tap on your broker for sure on this, is look at all the different areas that you can be evaluating you're being successful or not, and that helps you change and target things differently. Some of these we do need employers to provide to us. We will not have, maybe perhaps your production output or any of those, but that's information you guys should be looking in and evaluating with. Be creative with your plan design. I know we just talked about whether or not you can impact health, but I think you can. Removing copays for diabetic medication does help improve compliance, but you can also put in barriers so they don't get unnecessary back surgeries. And lastly, just continually be in tune with what's going on in your population. Are we having mergers? Are we having layoffs? What's going on? Does that change the tone and what we're going to present? Because you probably don't want to be presenting a health contingent program where you're asking them to meet certain health outcomes in the middle of a layoff. That's probably not going to go over well culturally. So think about things as you go through it. Just a couple quick case studies. I want to be respectful of our time, but these are just 2 case studies of groups that we've worked with and the impact that we've seen. This is one of our larger groups, so 3,500 lives. We are actually predominantly in the South that we work with, so even though I'm in Denver, we work with you guys. These are some impacts we've seen. In 2009, they were paying a $1,037 per employee per month, about between medical and RX, and we've worked with them over the past 5 years to really start getting wellness addressed, getting their plan design fixed, all this. Now they're paying $861 PEPM per month, which is a $176 decrease. You can just imagine how much that is over the years. But what I think is key is that we didn't just decrease utilization of the plan, and this is why you need to work with your broker, work with benefits, make sure your plan is communicating effectively. We saw an increase in total scripts, so people are getting their compliance meds filled more, but we're also getting them out of the hospital. So we are seeing behavior. It's going up in the right spots, going down in the right spots. The other one on here, this is a group we worked with. It's a construction company. And they are one we really tapped into safety. So if you're construction, manufacturing, oil and gas, any of those type companies, these are really great ways is to get involved with your safety program, because a lot of creating a culture of safety is the same as creating a culture of wellness, and a lot of times it should be done together. So with this group, we worked with them really heavily to work on their safety program, and as you can see, we've been able to pretty much, without hardly any plan design changes, keep them fairly constant over the past 6 years on this by really tapping into and understanding who their culture is. We put a lot more playful of a program, competitive fun with them, whereas the last one was much more clinically based because that fit their culture. So I think, again, just really understand who they are, be creative, evaluate constantly, and change things up. So that's that.
Thank you, Lisa. Next on our panel is Suzanne Perkins. Suzanne is the Regional Director of Health Strategies for United Healthcare. In her current position, Suzanne leads a team of health strategy consultants in the Southeast focused on using analytics to develop strategic plans, helping customers establish long-term solutions to manage and improve population health and reduce healthcare costs. With more than 12 years in the healthcare industry, Suzanne has extensive experience in behavior modification, health education, and program development. Suzanne is a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida. She earned her Bachelor of Science degree in Applied Psychology from the Georgia Institute of Technology and a Master of Science degree in Clinical Psychology from Barry University. Please help me welcome Suzanne Perkins.
Thank you. And I'm happy to be here today and excited to talk with you about how we approach health ownership at United Healthcare and United Health Group. And I do have a presentation to go along with some of the key points that I'd like to make today. And it really starts off by looking at the numbers. And we all know, we've heard it several times today, that the current healthcare situation in the US and in Florida isn't sustainable. And so you'll see a lot of key metrics here, and the one that I really want you to focus on is that 50 to 75% of our healthcare costs are related to lifestyle decisions and choices. And so what that really starts to get us thinking about is this idea that sustained reductions in cost really equal increasing individual health ownership. And so how do we do that? How do we do that in our populations? Well, the way that we approach that at United Healthcare is really from a framework. And there's a lot of information on this slide, so don't get caught up in the details. But what I really want you to understand is we're focused on a strategic partnership with the consultant and broker firms that we work with and our customers to really understand what their business goals are, their culture, the health of their population, and plot them on this framework that helps us to pinpoint opportunities for health ownership. And you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, there are 7 levers, and you can think of these as strategy levers. The idea being there's no right or wrong. It's all about what's right for that customer, what else is going on in their organization, and how ready are they for change in a particular area. And I'll give you a great example. Consumer-driven health plans. A speaker earlier today talked about, well, for those of you that aren't, intimately familiar with high-deductible health plans, you're in the minority. Well, there are groups that they say to me, Suzanne, we're not going to do that right now. It's not the right strategy for us. And I say, no problem. We have all these other strategies that we can partner with you and your consultant to determine what change you want to make and when. You also see solutions here related to decision-making and networks and quality and transparency when it comes to providers. And then you also see the 5th and 6th lever there, which is population health. And that's really what I'm going to talk about today. And this includes everything from individuals that have no risk that we want to keep healthy to individuals that have a chronic condition that we want to help them manage that effectively, and everyone in between. So when we talk about worksite wellness, it really is a strategic business initiative designed to help improve and maximize the health of your workforce and their productivity. And again, it should be focused on 3 populations, really keeping those folks that are no to moderate, limited risk, keeping them in that category, individuals that have risk, helping them to manage that risk, and then individuals that have a chronic condition, how can they be compliant with that care? And we all know we spend a lot of hours at work, right? So I really want you to walk away from this presentation today with some real tangible things that you could possibly do in your environment to bring wellness to your workplace. And there are 7 steps that I'm going to hit on at a very high level. And the very first one is senior leadership support. And this is really the idea that you have a budget, you've got not only senior leadership endorsement, but active participation. They're out there participating in whatever events you have on site, or they're making videos about how, everyone should go and participate in the wellness program so they can get their premium reduction. It also means likely that you have a wellness budget. And I was at a conference recently where I said, who has senior leadership support? And let's say 80% of the, room raised their hand. And I said, well, who has a wellness budget? And 3 people, And so think of all of this on a continuum, right? You've got, no support to that support that looks like they're walking the talk and actively engaged in the program. I think what's important, and Lisa hit on this as well, is regular communication back to the leadership team and hoping that the senior leadership team also works with middle management to give them the empowerment to let their employees have time away from work to participate in whatever it may be that is going on around wellness. The other second step here is about this idea that it's often given to HR as an HR or benefit team initiative, and really, if it's truly a strategic business initiative for your organization, you want it to have some infrastructure. And what that infrastructure can look like really depends on your group. But the most successful groups that I've seen have both a steering committee as well as champions. So it's this combination of individuals, depending on the size of your organization, maybe it's 4, 6, 8, 10 on the steering committee. They go across the organization with different departments. Lisa hit on this. You want folks that are in marketing and communication, folks that are in facility. How can you partner with safety? So that's your steering committee. And then you have champions. They're the feet on the street, the people that aren't necessarily in leadership responsibilities, but that people look up to. People listen to them, and they're a motivator. So if you think about steps 1 and 2, some wellness experts would say, if you don't have step one, why bother with the rest of the steps? And there is some truth to it, but I would also encourage you as I talk through these steps to think about there are little things that we can do here and there, regardless of senior leadership support, to promote health engagement in the workplace. Identifying target areas, lots of resources to do this, and it's all about just helping people to understand what their health issues are, but also as the employer, understanding what they're interested in. And so maybe a wellness interest survey, as with any survey, reporting back to them, we heard you, this is what we're gonna do based on what you told us. There's also medical claims information, pharmacy information. You wanna partner with your consultant, your carrier, to make sure you're understanding what issues do you need to address in your population. I'll put a quick plug in for a health assessment, and there's a lot of controversy as to whether or not this is beneficial, but I will say it gives us access to information that we don't get in claims, things like stress level, exercise levels, and so you may want to consider that as well as you're trying to identify the health of your population and opportunities. Step 4 is a biggie. It's huge, and it's all where the plan comes together. And this can involve anything from having awareness, educational, behavior change type support, to incentives and what is that strategy going to look like, as well as an effective communication plan. You can have the best programs in the world, but how do you get engagement in those programs? Communication is key, and also incentives play a role. You also want to think with the end in mind, right? Where do you want to be 3 to 5 years from now, and work backwards. Develop appropriate interventions, and I'll just say this to sum it up. According to the World Health Organization, 80% of all heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes, and 40% of cancer could be prevented if people ate healthier, exercised more, and stopped using tobacco. 80% of all heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes, and 40% of cancer could be prevented if people ate healthier, exercised more, and stopped using tobacco. So if you're not sure what to do in your environment, you can bet if you help create avenues for people to do those 3 things, you're on the right track. Number 6 is creating a supportive environment, and this is all about the context in which we make choices, and think about the amount of time that we spend at work and in our workplace. So maybe there's a policy you want to consider creating around tobacco. Maybe there's a policy around nutrition and food that's available at meetings. The message here is you want to make it easy for people to make healthy choices and hard for them to make the unhealthy choices. Think about your vending machines. All of those things that are in the environment where every day as we're going through our day, we're making a decision that impacts our health. Remember, 50 to 75% of our health costs are related to the decisions that we're making every day. And lastly is evaluating and celebrating success. You want to make sure in the planning stage in step 4 that you're really outlining the metrics that you're going to measure over time so that you can continue to monitor those, make changes to your programs as needed, and then you want to reward people and acknowledge those champions, committees, senior leadership, everyone that's been involved in making it happen. It is a company-wide effort and initiative when it is its most effective. And I'll just close with getting you to think about where are you today? Where are you in regards to those 7 steps, and what do you think you can do in the next few months to make a change in bringing wellness to your work site? Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. And last but certainly not least, we have Bill Mulkey. As CEO of E4 Health, Bill is focused on strategic initiatives as well as client acquisition and retention. He is a recognized expert on employee benefits and benefit plan integration. In 1992, Bill founded what would then become the largest provider of dependent care consultation services for employer groups, Work and Family Benefits, Inc., now a component of Aetna's service offerings. He is a graduate of Seton Hall and resides in Morristown, New Jersey, and it might be a tad bit warmer here today than there.
It's great to be here.
Welcome, Bill. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me give him a good Florida welcome.
Thanks, Denise. Thank you very much, and thanks to Tammy and AIF for the opportunity to be here today. I'm here with my partner, Cindy Sheriff. We're equal partners in this business, so if you like what you hear, you can give me all the credit. If you don't like what you hear, she's sitting right over there. You can blame her. Population health. Just to try to put it in context, so when I started working in New York City in the late 70s, healthcare costs for a single was $15 a month. For a family, it was $50 a month. That was for a $100 deductible, $200 for a family, 80/20 the first 2,000, 100% thereafter, $1 million max. Your total out-of-pocket exposure for a family was 3 times $1,500. Things have changed, so that's why we're having the discussion. Okay. So a little bit about E4. There's 3 products that we're bringing to market. EAP, which many of you are familiar with. EAPs have been commoditized, marginalized, and an afterthought. Big mistake. That's the first thing I'm going to say. We're going to talk about EAPs. Wellness, that you're hearing a lot about. Chronic care management. What we've done is taken those 3 products, we've put them on a single platform from a care management point of view so that we can do what? So that we can do 2 things from a population health perspective. Number 1, basic risk management. Understand what's going on in the population. And then number 2, figure out how to evaluate data through that understanding. Figure out how to engage people, which is the holy grail when you're talking about population health and wellness. Then figure out how to empower them to continue to change that, to pursue a healthy lifestyle, and then measure the effect. And why is it important? The bottom line is this is a compensation issue. That's really the bottom line, and that's why it's getting everybody's attention. We have 500 clients, 3 million members. I'm not going to read all this to you. This is a very smart crowd. I could tell that from talking to people. We have a senior team with tremendous experience. We're a hot list company for Workforce Magazine. But our whole strategic differential is talking about repositioning behavioral health and leveraging that and leveraging technology to improve population health and well-being. Some of the companies that we serve, you can see them up there. What do they all have in common? What they have in common is they have risk. So the question today, when we talk about wellness or population health, is how do you manage that risk? And why is it being talked about so much? So let's take a look at some really compelling statistics. A little bit of market research. Healthcare costs are up 63% over the past 7 years. Employer costs are up 51%. But more importantly, look what's happened on the employee side. That's up 91%, but their wages are only up 26%. So that's the problem. What's happening is healthcare costs are moving exponentially faster than inflation and a lot faster than employee wages. So we are dealing with an age-old problem, and the problem is cost shifting. And it's cost shifting to employees, and a lot of employees are getting to the point where they can't afford it. And to Suzanne's point earlier, lifestyle is what's driving a lot of the risk. So I'm not going to belabor that point. And specifically, when you start to look at where the low-hanging fruit is, the low-hanging fruit across a population really starts in one area, particularly for those of you that are self-funded. If you're not self-funded and you're insured and you're part of an insurance pool, which typically is the way it's set up, whether you're an individual or small group, basically up to a couple hundred lives, they're looking at they look at the data the same way that a self-funded employer looks at the data. And I was an employer. I am an employer. And when you're the employer, you know very well that this is a compensation issue, because it is crunching your profits, and it's not getting any better. And what's important, I think, around this discussion is let's try to figure out where we can bring immediate help to employers in the short term, and where is that low-hanging fruit, and then where are some of the larger the longer-term opportunities. And behavioral comorbidities and chronic illness together is the lowest-hanging fruit out there. Why? Because if you look at any population, 30% of that population is going to be chronically ill. 30% of the people who are chronically ill are going to be dealing with behavioral comorbidities. That means 9% of the population is probably driving 50 to 60% of your claims. And if you can figure out a way to intervene with that population, you can have an impact in the first 12 months. Wellness, as part of a population health strategy, is a longer-term pull. And it really depends on your culture. It depends on the demographics. There's a lot of great strategies that Lisa and Suzanne both talked about. There's a lot of great ideas around the country. But the bottom line is, if you're the CEO or the CFO, what I want to know is, this help me with where it's hurting me the most, and help me fast, because it's affecting everything else that I do. So that's what E4 is all about. And our solution is a holistic integration with the technology care management platform that we call HealthMap. So we've taken these 3 products that you're hearing about, LifeScope, we call our EAP LifeScope, our wellness program we call Life Choice, and our chronic care management program we call LifeLink. And this is, HealthMap is a operationally integrated. Cindy doesn't like that when I use that term because it sounds too technical. But what's going on in American healthcare, if you look at, and a lot of great companies out there, but the problem is that a lot of companies are dealing with legacy systems that are not integrated. Now, you can integrate a brochure and make it look like you're all things to all people, but it's not too different than the automobile car manufacturers back in the 60s. You know, American car manufacturers dominated the world, and in comes the Japanese and the Germans, and they take our market share. Was it because they were a lot smarter than us, or we didn't get it, how to create cars with more gas mileage? No, that wasn't it. It was because we had assembly lines, and to stop those assembly lines and stop producing those Chevys and Pontiacs and Buicks, et cetera, and go to a lower cost, you know, a lower fuel type of car, you know, better gas mileage, if you will, was going to totally stop the assembly line, and stock prices would go like that. So that didn't happen. And today, what you have in healthcare with what I'll call manufacturers of healthcare products and services, it's very difficult for them to stop and to rearrange their technology platforms to integrate and to talk to each other. And that's what Health Map does. We had an opportunity when we started E4 4 years ago to start with a blank sheet of paper. So we were able to look at what's really driving healthcare costs and figure out how you make the connect. If you think about what I said with chronic illness and behavioral comorbidities, if that's the connect, if chronic illness and behavioral comorbidities are inextricably linked and driving a lot of risk, then the solution to solving that problem also has to be that well connected. And the reality is, in most places, in most parts of the country, regardless of the size of the provider of insurance, if their systems don't talk to each other, and if their systems don't make it happen like that and figure out how to identify risk in a population and say to you as the employer or as the intermediary, this is where you got to focus limited resources, because if you're an employer out there, you have very limited resources, right? It's all, healthcare is sucking up the oxygen in the tent in this country. So whatever money you're going to spend on wellness or population health, it has to be focused where it's going to do the most good. And what we would suggest to you is the first stop on the train, take a look at it, take a look at your claims data, is chronic illness with behavioral comorbidities, and figure out how to connect that dot. That's what we're doing. Now, on the right-hand side of this slide is all the different data points that we take and can enter into Health Map, and it's everything that you might imagine. And we have a booth here. We're happy to talk more about it. I'm going to kind of click through some of this. So as I said earlier, our core competency is EAP. Why? Because behavior drives 75% of healthcare costs. So if you're sitting there with an EAP program and you're saying, yeah, my EAP program gets 2 to 4% utilization, 5% utilization, 6% utilization, that's right. That's what it gets, because it's sitting out over here. The whole idea is to reposition EAP and put it within the DNA of everything else that you're doing. That's what Health Map does. Some of our key features is that we have master's level clinicians, clinically based positive psychology type of approach, no time limit on calls. But the EAP integration is the DNA in over 600 algorithms. That's a big miss, in our opinion, in the marketplace. A little busy slide, but I talked about it earlier. The care management platform, the 4 E's in E4 Health stand for evaluation. You got to evaluate data. Healthcare, the way we've done it historically, is a rear view mirror perspective. We look, if you're out there and you're a group of a couple hundred lives or a couple thousand lives, so your broker comes walking in, Lisa comes walking in, and she says, okay, here's your claims data, and you look at data for the past 12 months, and you're always looking in the rearview mirror saying, okay, what happened, and now tell me what my costs are going to be in the future. That's a bad model. That's part of the problem. The problem has been we're looking at the past and trying to predict the future. What we have to do is figure out what's going on in the present, take a look at the past, and then, to Suzanne's point, you have to use something that's going to give you a glimpse as to what might be coming, and that's where health risk assessment comes from. And it's important for one very important reason, because in a health risk assessment, it will identify for you the people in your population who are ready to change their behavior, as opposed to not. You can have the most wonderful programs in the world, but if people don't care, they're not going to change. That's just human nature. So whatever your population health strategy is, whatever your wellness strategy is, if you get 30% of your people to participate, to really get engaged, if you can move that needle, you're going to move your healthcare costs. So just as a suggestion for a framework on utilization. Engaging is all about, figuring out what are the right programs that work for your company. Suzanne is exactly right. It starts with senior leadership. If you don't have the support from the top, save your money, don't do it. If you don't get 60% participation in a wellness program, don't do it. Then once you get the people engaged, you have to figure out how to empower them, to stay with it. That means you need to bring to the table all kinds of interesting things that inspire people, that get people excited, and we use convergent media. So if you're on our wellness portal, you're looking at animation, you're looking at video, you're looking at sight and sound. Why? Because we live in a YouTube world, and you have to figure out a way how to engage people if you're going to ask them to do this. So that's part of what we bring to the market. And then you look at that effect. You're looking at, okay, so what's the impact going to be? But a key differential about E4 is that we start with the why and not the what. It doesn't matter what's going on. I mean, it does because you're spending money on it, but why is that happening? That's the question. Why is that happening? Most other people start with the what. You know, what does our population look like in terms of biometric data? There's a lot of criticism around, you know, a lot of thoughts around biometric data. What's the return on investment? The reality is there aren't really great numbers, you know, around that from a wellness point of view. So you really have to look at your population, you have to look at the strategies and how you segment that. But you might look at gaps in care, you might look at a reward strategy. People have talked about incentive design. It's very important. So if you have somebody who has diabetes that you get from claims data, and you might look at their biometric data and see other numbers that are not terribly flattering, the question is, why is that happening? And again, Suzanne hit the nail on the head in her summary comments. It's really about what's going on from a lifestyle point of view and what's going on with the whole person. Not just what's going on below the neck, but what's going on above the neck. What's going on in that person's head. And what we would suggest, and what a lot of data and research would suggest, is that there's these things called psychosocial factors. I am not the clinician in our firm. Cindy is, and we have a whole bunch of clinicians. But psychosocial factors are life. Psychosocial factors are, you know, I have a disabled child. I'm under stress from a financial point of view. I'm going through legal issues. I have an elder care issue that I'm dealing with. It's life, and life creates clutter. And unless as an organization you can figure out how to help people with that clutter, they're not going to pursue the wellness program because the clutter is going to get in the way. And they're not going to deal with their gap in care because the clutter is going to get in the way. So the first thing you have to figure out is what's important to them, help them deal with that, and you know what? They'll help you deal with your rising health care costs from a wellness and a population health perspective. So because it's the whys that determine the what, what's going on. So you got to get behind the scenes and get to the why. So this is Mary. So Mary is a 50-year-old administrator with an autistic child. She's overweight. She has early signs of diabetes from the biometric. She's high stress, not sleeping well. She knows she needs to lose weight, and she's worried about her health. But she's busy, and she doesn't have the energy. So our interventions are going to come in, include resources to address the autistic child, stress management, weight loss group. This was actually a case that we had recently. And when you put Mary through our health map system, yep, her numbers are terrible from a biometric point of view. That's part of your wellness strategy. And let's assume you have 100% participation. You have an incentive plan design that says everybody has to do it, otherwise they get absolutely creamed on their health care costs. So that's an effective strategy, by the way. The research is, you know, carrot or stick. Unless I'm feeling some pain, I'm probably not changing my behavior to start to get some attention. So Mary is somebody who's participated in biometrics, and her biometrics aren't pretty. But through the HRA, you learn a lot of other things about Mary. And you learn that she's dealing with an autistic child. And from the claims data, you learn that she's not taking her diabetes medication. That goes back to my point about chronic illness and behavioral comorbidities. So she's stressed out, she might be depressed, so she is dealing with behavioral comorbidities, and she's diabetic, she's dealing with chronic care. You don't deal with Mary, she's going to cost you money down the road. So what do? What we say when it goes through our system is we actually score everybody in the population. A lot of people do that from a data analytics point of view, but what we do is stratify and identify from a priority point of view what to talk about first with Mary. Because the research is, unless you talk about the fact that she's looking for a summer camp for her autistic child with other autistic children just like her child, she's not dealing with anything else at that moment. So when we prioritize what to do and our clinician comes walking in the morning and looks at that screen, and there's going to be outreach to Mary based on the score that we assign and the fact that she wants help. There are a lot of people out there that want help. We're going to call up Mary and we're going to take care of that autistic child situation in 24 hours. And at the same time, we're going to start to talk to her about a little bit of a walking program and taking a look at her diet. But we're not going to overload her with that, because what you learn from a behavioral point of view is it's very small steps. It's very small. There's some things you can do like that. There are other things you have to take small steps to. And there are other things you have to jump on, like that gap in care. But you have to do it in a way and in a sequence that makes sense to Mary, not to you, not to the insurance company, but to Mary, because it's got to be about Mary and that focus. And if you do it, and we could talk about these numbers, but in this case, we go over, what the condition was, what the utilization is, what the intervention is with and without E4, what the savings are, and you roll it all together. And in this particular case, and this is a pretty conservative estimate, by the way, it's about $14,000, our intervention without our intervention. And our booth is right here, happy to go over the numbers with you. So we talk about the fact that you move out of that larger perspective of population health, you start to look at wellness, as my two other panel experts have said, wellness deserves a strategy. So that strategy's got to be a full court press. It can't just be, you put it out there and you hope somebody takes this HRA, you hope, it's voluntary and things like that. Nope, doesn't work. Has to start with support from leadership. You have to figure out how much money you have to spend on this and devote those resources where we're going to do the most good. And what you're trying to do is to design, and I think, again, this has been said, cost-effective, targeted interventions that produce positive health outcomes and help improve people's quality of life. And that should be the messaging. It shouldn't be punitive, in our experience. It shouldn't be punitive. It shouldn't be, I'm going to hammer you unless you participate in this wellness program. It should be all about, do you want to walk down the aisle and see your daughter get married? Do you want to see your grandkids? Do you want to live a life that's full? And do you understand we're all in this together? In a for-profit healthcare system, on the commercial side, forget about Medicare and Medicaid. I'm not talking about that right now. I'm talking about commercial population. Employers are paying people salaries. Employers are providing health care to those employees. Everybody has skin in that game. Because if they don't, it's going to impact the ability of me as the employer to give you a raise or to pay you a bonus. And that's the common denominator. It's all about how do we create healthy organizations to create strong communities to compete in a globally competitive environment to create opportunity for people. And healthcare is a big part of that. So it has to have a strategy. Engagement's the key. You have to have proactive outreach, and that's one of the things that we do through our health map system. You have to get people juiced up. So we talk about convergent media as part of our health risk assessment. You need a robust wellness portal. That's kind of table stakes in this game. So you need something that can do all the things that need to be done. If an employer wants to have a participation-based strategy or an outcomes-based strategy, be able to do it, be able to link to Fitbits and all kinds of other things and be agnostic about it. It doesn't matter where it's coming from, just link and go. And you have to have personalized coaching because it's all about a one-on-one experience. That's it. A lot more to talk about, but there's only so much time to do.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. That was very informative. Thank you. So we've reached the question and answer portion of the panel, and so I'd like to open it up to see if there are any questions from the audience. I'll tell you, they're asleep. I'm sure of
Yeah, I
it.
know.
They ate too much. Okay, well then I'll start it off. So Bill, I'll go to you first since we just finished with you, and you touched on this, but I want to make sure the audience hears this. We talk a lot about return on investment from a business perspective. So is that contingent on the plan receiving total implementation and buy-in, or can you find that a wellness plan and EAPs are of little value without weaving into the firm's cultural mission?
Well, that's a great question because that's a big question that a lot of people have right now. What's the return on investment with wellness? And depending upon who you talk to, you'll get different reactions to that. My experience, and I think the research would bear this out, is that Milliman data would say that there is a direct correlation, for instance, as part of a population health strategy, that there's a direct relationship between chronic illness and behavioral comorbidities. So where we always come from is from kind of the payer's perspective, the employer's perspective. Where is it hurting me the most, and how can you help me solve that problem? So the lowest hanging fruit, as I said, is behavioral comorbidities and chronic illness. And Milliman would say if you don't address that, it's going to cost you 3 to 4 times. Meaning, if you have somebody who's chronically ill with a behavioral comorbidity and you don't help that person fill that gap in care, take that medication, being compliant, it's going to cost you money. Number one, so that's the low-hanging fruit. Number two, as far as wellness goes, it has to have senior management support. It has to have a strategy. That strategy means that you need good advice if you're an employer. As I said earlier, you need to have a certain level of participation. That's driven by plan design. So that gets into what's your incentive strategy. But there's a lot of bad advice out there from what we're seeing. And it's not a one-size-fits-all. You have to look at the culture. You have to understand. Retail is different than, I mean, for instance, retail is different than a hospital. It's different than a law firm. It's different than a manufacturing facility. So you have to look at the culture and figure out how you create a plan design that's specific to that culture. But the key thing is you have to get people involved, you have to get everybody engaged, and then with those limited resources, you have to figure out, okay, who do we focus our resources on? We're going to get the best bang for our buck.
Okay. Now, Suzanne, I've got a question for you. When it comes to employee incentives, how effective are they, and do they really reinforce the wellness plan?
You know, in my experience and specific customers that I can think of in Florida that have gone from really starting at a base level, let's say in 2005, and ramping up to this year launching an outcomes-based program where people have to meet a certain, BMI or blood pressure, incentives were extremely effective. They went from having, in a population of 20,000 employees and about 54 health assessments, to about 18,000 health assessments. Now, that was just one piece of their overall wellness program, but it was a requirement to earn points towards their premium reduction. So they can be very effective. A lot of the research points to incentives being extremely effective in increasing engagement. Whether or not it's effective in sustaining behavior change, I think research still needs to be done around that in particular, but definitely effective in increasing engagement and participation.
And what do they say? It takes 21 days to break a habit?
Yeah.
So it's just getting the company in to keep that employee there for 21 days, and then hopefully they move on to a better.
And I often say that because a lot of people struggle with having to offer incentives for people to do things that they should inherently maybe want to do, but it just sometimes doesn't work like that. There's a lot of things going on in life, and I like to believe that sometimes that extrinsic motivator can turn into an intrinsic one over time. So maybe it's the incentive that gets them there, but then it's the way that they feel, the energy that they have to play with their children, that then becomes this internal driver for them to make healthier choices.
Thank you. And Lisa, there are a number of similar components in most wellness plans. What components tend to receive the least amount of buy-in that you have seen from employees? You think of anything specific?
I was going to say, it can be kind of all over the board on what it is. I would say some of the stuff that I think has fallen flat a lot of the times would be just when it's only on a portal and it's not very engaging, it's not very dynamic. I think sometimes I struggle with personally, we're telling people just to go to portal to get healthy, and then they're just sitting there and it doesn't do anything. And I think people know that, and so they don't get very excited. They end up just doing it just to get the points. They're not really engaged in the process. So I'd say that's one of the biggest areas that we don't see great uptake, and I think with good reason, because it's not necessarily always most effectively done to really get people excited about it.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when it is just a portal, the employee may forget to go in and do their daily checkoff or their weekly checkoff or whatever, and so I've heard some of that as well. The question for any of you, have you ever seen a plan work when it did not have senior leadership buy-in?
I had an experience with a customer over in the Tampa area, and they didn't have a wellness budget and had moderate to low senior leadership support. And through the work of a committee, able to get a lot of donations from the community, and it really proved to be a very big morale booster, and that was recognized by senior leadership, and then they got a wellness budget the next year. It wasn't a huge wellness budget, but it was, baby steps, and every step is change. So that would be one example. But in general, you can only be so effective, and I think Lisa said it's about being realistic. And so sometimes when I'm talking with groups, I'm like, let's keep it real, and let's talk about what the situation is and what you can or can't do and what's going to be most effective.
And I would just add to that component is that I've seen a lot of times where there is executive support, but then it hasn't been communicated to the mid-level, and then it falls completely flat. So I would say you have to have it at all levels for it to truly be effective. And you can't just put incentives in place, because I've seen large ones that fall flat too, because it's not bought in. People don't understand why. So I think that's where it gets back to strategy, communication plans, all that to really make it effective.
Yeah, I think executives will buy in if they see what's in it for them from a bottom line perspective. They'll buy in really fast. Even the most hardened executive who could care less about wellness gets it in terms of what it's doing to his bottom line. We created a questionnaire through this experience of looking at incentives and looking at strategies, communication strategies. And one of the things that we found going back a couple of years is, so if you look at who are the poster children for wellness, they look like all the people who are well. You know, I mean, who wants to get involved with wellness? Well, everybody who's in shape, whose blood pressure is terrific, whose BMI is like Adonis, you know, they got their hands up. So you have to think about what's the impact to the people, on the rest of the population who you're trying to reach, who might be driving your risk, who doesn't look like that. So what we learned going through questionnaires is you might have, you know, some Spartans out there that love physical fitness challenges and eat up road races and walking and running challenges and things like that. But if you listen real close, there's a lot of people out there that just want help me with figuring out what I should be eating and what I shouldn't be eating, just basic nutrition stuff. So we found that challenges need to be multifaceted and they need to respond to different dimensions within the culture and the population. And the people that you put out there in a pictorial sense, they shouldn't look so good, all of them. They should look like people that are going to be challenged to get to that image of wellness. And we've just found that has an incredible impact on how the program's received, because now it really is an every man, every woman type of approach. And the CEO, the CFO, what they have to support, they have to get behind spending a little bit of money to try to help reduce risk in their population and send a message that this is all about your well-being. And it's, you know, it's competing balance. It has mutually beneficial objectives for everybody.
Well, and I think in addition to those, sometimes for the employee's perspective, even though, like, I'll give you an example where I work, we have great senior leadership buy-in, but we started, in addition to the program that we have, we started doing these 5Ks. Mostly it's just kind of a fun thing, and we'll get special T-shirts made. One of the employees will design the T-shirt. And what I found was I'll go out, and some of us run, some of us don't, and I'll go out with the employees to do that. And this was one particular issue. The lady's worked there for 18 months. She works in housekeeping, never says a word. Well, she's a little bit older than me, so we wound up walking together in the 5K, and we had a great conversation, and now we have such a good relationship. So it's more about team building, and I just saw a lot of great things come out of those events that we've been doing. So any other questions from the audience? Back there.
There's also research, by the way, that says that walking's a lot better for you than running long term.
Especially as we mature, not get old, mature.
I like that.
Hey, just kind of following up on your point about the people who are going to do it anyway. When you on an average company, kind of what's your baseline for how many people are probably going to do it anyway, and how many people above and beyond that number are you looking to get to consider a wellness program successful? I mean, again, I'm just kind of generalizing across all the companies you deal with. And then as a follow-up to that, what's your perspective on the threat of EEOC action impacting wellness programs, and if they act, is that going to make wellness programs really kind of useless? So.
Which one of us specifically are you?
Anybody?
Anybody? Ladies first?
Well, I'll jump in on the EEOC one because you finished with that, and we've been getting a lot of those questions. Kind of where we're seeing on the EEOC, and if you guys aren't aware of what's been happening right now, is that there's kind of a conflict in how the Americans with Disability Act is written. Wellness programs must be voluntary is basically the language in there. And then under healthcare reform, you can incentivize up to 30 or 50% of the total amount of the premiums equivalents, or participatory, there's really truly no cap currently in the programs. And so clearly the issues become, at what point is a financial incentive no longer making a program voluntary? And so that's kind of the root cause, and there's been there. So I think some of the stuff that the underpinnings that we're hearing and our legal team is reviewing and constantly is that there is potential that it's going to be kind of the same situations that we deal with health contingent programs may be applicable to participatory, so putting some caps on there. I think we always encourage is also, try to see what you can do without having to go to incentives and those kinds of components as well, because I think you can get a lot when you create a culture of health and environment. I have a group of construction workers. Those are not people who typically are engaged in wellness, right? They're guys, no offense, but those are there. And we got them participating with pretty much no incentive. And we're getting 65, 70% participation in different programs with only $50 of stuff. So I think just being creative, you can also not get into that situation, but the only other big thing on there is just make sure your programs are always supportive to health, and I think that's a key thing, is that you're not trying to target those with risks, and always be helpful in trying to get people healthier.
Yeah, and I'll comment then on the aspect of participation. And, a lot of groups do look to incentives to try to get participation, and that idea of, how many people are going to do it anyway. I haven't found a golden formula for that in my experience, but I've seen, like the example I said, 54 health assessments to 18,000. So I think it's about starting with what's the baseline metrics for this population, and then being able to measure that over time. But as far as an ideal participation rate, you'd want to look to probably 70%, especially if you're starting to consider going to an outcomes-based program. You really want to have a high level of participation. Then the other point I'll make around this is the point that I think Bill was talking a lot about, is this idea of chronic conditions and helping people that have chronic conditions manage them effectively. And then people, I talked about, kind of we call them the worried well that come out first, but having programs that support people no matter where they are on that continuum is really important. So like from a United Healthcare perspective, we've got, the coaching, telephonic coaching, in-person coaching, but we also have condition management programs. We have diabetes health plan where, individuals that have diabetes or prediabetes can get, their copays waived for office visits and for prescriptions to be compliant with their care. So I think that idea too of really, it isn't one size fits all, but make sure everybody in that population feels like there's something for them is important.
Any other questions?
I
Oh, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I think that it kind of goes back to, you have to understand your culture and really take a look at, what is the plan design and what are the incentives? Because you could have, as Suzanne is saying, you could have a group, and we have had groups where there was, very little incentive, if you will, to participate. You get, meager, 1%, 2%, voluntary participation. Then you go to a plan design, as some other speakers have said this morning, where we know where the trip is in terms of the out-of-pocket expense, either directly through plan design or through contributions. So it's well documented now as to where various trips are from an out-of-pocket point of view, where it's going to get people participating in that plan, and a good intermediary can give you that advice. Let's say you get 100% participation. It still comes down to who are the right people that you're going to focus those resources on, because whoever the vendor is that's supporting you, they can't hit everybody effectively. So that's why when we created Health Map, we said we need to be able to look at the risk in the population and not just look at the people that are participating in the programs, but look at the people where we would have the greatest opportunity to actually move the needle based on their readiness to change when you look at their total profile. So my answer to your question is 30% is the number that we're trying to hit. And that 30% we're trying to hit, I said earlier that 30% of a population is, on average, chronically ill. 30% is dealing with behavioral comorbidities. That's 9% of the population. We're trying to hit 2/3 of that. And the reason we do is because that population is looking for help, because they're not doing well. So they want to live, and they know they need help managing that. Then we're trying to hit 12% from an EAP point of view and 12% from a wellness point of view. In any given population, 50 to 60% of the population is going to have wellness issues. You're going to have people that have high BMI, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, what have you. You're not going to get all of them. In our model, wellness is a long-term pull. You might see no return on investment for the first year, but if you can consistently get to 12% of that 60% over time, you're going to be reducing the BMI, reducing the cholesterol, and you'll see a return on wellness longer term if it's designed properly. The last piece is EAP has, from a scientific point of view, high rate of return on investment, very high return on investment. It's out there in all kinds of research. So you want to use, and it's because it's all about behavior, so you need to understand the behavioral piece because it's part of the scoring. When you reach out and touch somebody in terms of who you want to work with, you want to focus the resources that you have to focus on those people you're going to be successful with. And so in our model, we're trying to hit 30% of the population. Your incentive design will probably, if you do it right, like Suzanne was saying, you can go from, ground zero to 80% overnight because people don't want to feel the pain. They don't want money coming out of their pockets, so they're going to participate, but are they exactly the right people to be focusing your vendor resources on to actually do something and move the needle? No, there's a priority pecking order to that. And that's what we score, and we're looking to hit that sweet spot.
Well, thank you. We've come to the close of our panel, and I think there are a few takeaways that we've received today. First being that wellness is a cost saver for business, and neglecting the low-hanging fruit leaves us less competitive, not only for profit margins, but also in quality workforce recruitment. There is not a doubt that healthcare costs are rising. Businesses are being required to shoulder more of that cost, and any effort to mitigate that impact should be welcomed with open arms. The intangibles of a reputation and corporate responsibility can't be understated. Wellness programs and broad-based EAPs help chip away at the public perception of corporate greed and unconcern. And like I said, while we have come to the close of our panel, I'm sure that each of the panelists that are here with us today, I'm sure will be happy to talk with you afterwards. And again, I want to thank each of you for taking time out of your schedule to come to Orlando, which is probably about to rain or may already be raining today. But sorry we couldn't bring you sunshine. But thank you so much for being here. And I'd like to just take the opportunity, Tammy, to thank AIF for putting on this informative panel and also for this the seminar here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.